Welcome back to another episode of the Outdoor Adventures Hunting Podcast, heard on Brownfield Ag News and Agra America. I'm Brownfield anchor reporter Brent Barnett. Today on the show, we're joined by Josh Sparks, a member of Midwest Whitetail. That's a popular online hunting show, and we're excited to talk about his journey to a career in the outdoor industry and also what it takes to work in the industry as well. Josh, thanks a lot for taking some time here in early November to join us on Brownfield. How are you doing today?
Man, I'm doing absolutely awesome. First off, thank you for having me here. It's an honor to get to represent Midwest Whitetail in this fashion, and it's been a lot of fun. I'm sure that anybody taking a listen to this is familiar that awesome cold front time with that late October movement, and it's just continued, has resulted in some great hunting. So things are busy around here in a good way. A lot of episodes coming down the pipe. A lot of deer have been tagged, and some big deer at that. So all is well in the Midwest whitetail world. And, you know, when you do something you love every day, it's very hard to complain. So.
And before we really get into the topic today, up to this point, are we really starting to see the rut kick in?
Man, yeah, it depends. It's such a funny question because I think it depends who you're talking to, right? You know, you're going to have one guy say, no, the rut, it's not here yet. Some guy might say yes. I think it depends on your farm, the property, how it lays out. For us and our team, we've seen quite a bit of rutting activity, you know, especially. So I was actually hunting with a good buddy, Brian Brown. He was from Georgia, or he is from Georgia, drew a tag. So we were bouncing around in Iowa public land, and it was pretty slow where we were. I mean, we did see some grunting, some light, checking, but nothing that resulted in somebody thinking like, man, rut's in full tilt. However, if you were going to talk to Mike, you were going to talk to Owen, they were seeing some really good chasing. They were seeing grunting there, but nothing in that like quote unquote lockdown aspect. Fast forward a few days, what are we, November 3rd, you said? So starting the 31st, the property that we made a switch to, the buck that we were hunting was daylight walking. I mean, there's no doubt that the mature bucks, the older or more dominant deer, I should say, not necessarily the bigger rack deer, but the more dominant bucks, they're looking for those first available does. I mean, it went from thinking that we were in the game on this deer, same pattern, same bedding area, bed to food, food to bed, and now he's just walking. And obviously that's coming from trail cam data, but funnily enough, the night we made the change, October 30th, he daylighted in the spot we were going to 40 minutes before we got there. And by the time that we were all set up and I checked my phone, got that text, and I was like, dang, we missed him. Maybe he's in the area. He was all the way to the cabin working scrapes in front of where my buddy was staying right there. And so it is definitely kicking in, and I think it's only going to get better or harder, depending if you're hunting one deer. Every day we get further into the month, more and more does are going to go into estrus, and best advice is just to be there. That's where we're at. So pick your best stand, hunt the wins, and hopefully it works out for you.
I had that thought here that Saturday, the 28th of October was the last time I went out. Went into my best spot that I've had encounters with the last few years on a piece of public land in central Iowa. Mm-hmm. And on my way in, Josh, and I haven't seen a lot of pressure in the area this fall specifically. So I'm on my way in, and right at like the entrance of the access path, not too far from the parking lot, man, I'm telling you, I was just seeing sign everywhere. Scrapes, yep. Freshly opened, some trees ripped up. I debated whether I should just, set up on something like that. I know it feels kind of weird being that close to the access path and to the entrance, but I debated it, ended up going way back in deep to where I wanted to go. Saw one deer that night. It was a doe. And then on my walk out, just after closing time, right back up there, right around where that sign was on my way out in my headlamp, there was a really nice buck off the access path.
It's funny you mentioned that.
It was like, probably like a mid 130, low 140 class buck. And for me, that's a shooter all day. And it was just like killing me inside. I should have went with the gut, but I guess that's just the way it goes sometimes.
It'll be interesting. We should talk after, see which piece of public you were hunting, because ironically, Brian, my buddy, he had a bunch of cameras out, came up in August, put those out on his way to Nebraska. By far, the best camera that he had, consistency-wise, was put on a scrape probably 25 yards off the access path, 75 yards from where we're parking the truck. by far the most activity, the most consistent activity. And that was something that I told him. I've just noticed over the years when I've hunted public lands, like I get the idea that you feel the need to get quote unquote as far away as possible, to feel like you're giving yourself a chance. But at the end of the day, don't doubt the scout, as my really good buddy Kyle Karcher would say. Like, if the sign's there, it's worth at least sitting over. The trouble is you just don't know if it's a nighttime, right? But as you're experienced and what we were seeing on camera, that might be one of the most overlooked spots on pieces of public ground, is right where you're parking. Probably because nobody ever hunts it. I mean, if you think about it, it's probably the least pressured spot on the entire spot.
And who knows, they may be bedding close enough where they can watch from
100%. Very possibly, yeah. Yeah.
So,
no, it'll be interesting to see, based on what we just talked about, where you're living, how far away that you're hunting. So
yeah, sure. Well, I wanna get into the topic here today. Excited to learn about how folks can get a career in the outdoor industry, if that's something that they've dreamed of,
yeah.
something they've always wanted to do. So, how did you get involved with Midwest Whitetail?
Yeah. First and foremost, it's never been easier to do with digital media, social media, etc. I mean, everybody's got a walking resume in theory if they chose to build it and think of it that way. But, I guess my quote unquote start in the outdoor space, it started 2008. I was a viewer back then. I don't even know how old I would have been. 2008, I'd have been 12 years old. We didn't have hunting television. They never had the outdoor channel, all that good stuff. And I started to figure out how to learn how to use a computer and would type in free hunting shows. And one day, Midwest Whitetail popped up. Bill Winke started, obviously, the Midwest Whitetail brand back then. And I just became a diehard fan. And fast forward to my senior year of high school, I ran track. And I just distinctly remember one meet, I saw Bill Winke. He was a coach for Alvia at the time. And I just dropped what we were doing in warm-ups, went over and I was like, "Hi, I'm Josh Sparks. Love your show." And then I had no idea what else to say after that, and so he's just kind of looking at me like, "That's cool, man. Nice to meet you." And we luckily, just kept in contact. He had, Alvia had showed up at a couple of meets we'd been to. And then he actually ended up being gracious enough to film some of our track events at the state meet. And I just asked them then, I was like, how can I get involved? I want to become an intern, whatever it takes, etc. And at that point, I had no media experience. I certainly never dreamt of doing that. I just knew that I loved to be in the woods. And he basically, shut that down and goes, "Well, go to college. If you're still interested, call me." And so I was like, okay, well, now I've got a reason to go to college. I was going to go anyway, but I never at that time really had a plan or purpose or passion that drove me outside of hunting. So I went to a community college where I'm from and did that because it was an easier class schedule and it was more flexible. So I based my schedule in the fall around night classes and then midday classes during turkey season. Well, randomly, I met a person at school who found out, because I'd spent a lot of my money that I got for school on my first set of cameras, because I realized I was like, well, I need to prepare for this internship. So I bought a camera, I bought an editing suite. It was one of those situations where I spent way too much money and had no idea how to actually use it. But, you feel like if you got this stuff, you're legitimate. I was not at all. Happened to meet a guy whose cousin was married to Jared Mills. And I was, at that time, following along the George Brett story, super big fan of what Jared was doing. And I was like, dude, please introduce me. So the long story short is I got to meet the right people and was very fortunate to be in the right place at the right time with the right opportunities. Jared let me follow along. I did get in contact with him. I met him at IHOP and, I just told him, I was like, look, man, I will stay out of your way, but can I please tag along on whatever it is that you're doing? Again, in the back of my mind, it was like, all I knew was that I wanted to be in the hunting woods, whether that was running a camera, you see that on the hunting shows, you're like, I need to learn how to do that. Or, I started to work with Jared and then I saw that editing became, another avenue or one that really paired with video. And so, this is 2015. I was doing some filming for Jared. I started doing some brief editing. He was doing the Midwest Whitetail Heartland show at the time. And I basically asked him, can I please get the assets, the footage that you're working with? He would do a show. I would try to replicate it. And he gave me the opportunity to try. And that is the hardest part. Anybody that's wanting to get into this, you have to have stuff to practice with. I mean, I'm sure when you're trying to become a broadcaster, got to have the right equipment, or you have to have the right, somebody that was giving you audio to cut it up. I mean, I don't know, but for me, I got so lucky meeting the right people at the right times. And then they took a chance on me, and a lot of times where they probably shouldn't. I was a pretty big bonehead during school. So fast forward to that 2017, Bill called me, offered me a full-time job because Midwest Whitetail had some shifting where the hunting public was created. And, if they had never done that, I don't know if I'd be sitting here. So very, very thankful for that opportunity. He had seen that I was very serious about it. I'd committed financial resources, I'd committed time, and most importantly, I was working pretty much for free at that point because it's all about getting your way in. So Jared gave me an unofficial internship. I mean, that's what it comes down to. I never did get to do the Midwest Whitetail internship, but luckily I was able to land a job 2017.
Man, that's a really cool story. I like what you said about being in the right place at the right time. So obviously establishing connections was a big part of your journey. So I think a lot of people would have a question, where do I start? So, if you mentioned the media aspect and the social media, where would a person start these days, Josh?
Today, where I would start if I was doing it all over again is the same spot, which is to never wait for your opportunity. You can't pick and choose when you're going to meet the person. You can't pick and choose if it's an internship or maybe it's you run into somebody at a local restaurant. You have no idea. But what you can control immediately is learning the skills of the trade that you want to do. So let's just say, like for me specifically, that was photography, videography. Well, I bought a camera, or, if you're in school, your local, the media department might have cameras you can check out, but you got to learn how to run it. I always tell our interns, the camera is your passport. If you put the time in to learn it, and frankly, most deer hunters don't really have the inclination that they want to learn how to run cameras or technical gear. And so it's not always the best fit, but there are some folks who love hunting so much, like me, that they'll do anything to get into there. So let me put it this way. I never would have been selected for our internship, never. Because if somebody had asked me, what do you want to do this for? I'd say, because I like to hunt. And I'm sick of being yelled at by my parents that I am not taking life or school or a job seriously. And, I love my dad, love him to death. But when I quit school, I told him, I was like, I don't want to be like you and do what you like to do 1 week out of the year. I can't do that. I could never envision a life where 1 week I get to enjoy myself doing the things that I love. So just don't wait. There's YouTube. That was, that's YouTube University, as I like to call it. You can literally, let's say you have a skill you want to learn. I want to learn how to be a better photographer. I want to learn how to video edit. Write down everything in that skill. What is ISO? What is photography? What is lenses? What is etc. Turn it into a question and type it in on YouTube. Because the reality is there is somebody who has done a very good job explaining every single thing. And then you might meet the right person. If you've got the skills and, you utilize social media, Instagrams, TikToks, it's a very different world, the digital space is now. But you could post all the things that you're editing, and it's just at the end of the day, find somebody to go tag along with. It doesn't have to be a hunting show. It could be weddings. It could be local sports reporters. It could be somebody like yourself who's like, hey, we have a podcast, but we want to do more. The reality is like, that's where people get separated. There's a lot of people that say they want to do this. They want to do it for a living, but very few people have the aptitude or desire to really put in the work before the reward arrives, I guess. And so I know that's a very long-winded way of saying practice now, practice the way you want to play, develop your skills, and then try to relationship and network build. I mean, at the end of the day, your work will speak for yourself. And, you might not meet the right person, but it doesn't matter if you meet the right person if you haven't put in the work before, because there's so many folks trying to do the same thing. So
I have to give my university a shout out. So I graduated from Northwest Missouri State in 2015 and had just a great experience there in the media department. Had a great TV instructor there, learned about editing on Final Cut Pro,
Yep.
and ended up transitioning after that in different jobs that I've had through like Adobe Premiere Pro and things like that. But so for anyone that's never used that software before, Josh,
Mhm.
uh, how do they even get any experience editing and learning about it? Are there courses online they can take? And what should they get for a camera?
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's a question I get a lot. What should I get for a camera? It depends what your budget is. At the end of the day, I would not recommend buying a new camera until somebody locate a used one. Facebook Marketplace is a fantastic spot to go. Do not buy hunting gear from hunters. Buy your used cameras from wedding photographers, videographers, etc. You're always going to get a better quality camera because those folks definitely take care of their gear better than outdoorsmen. Or maybe that's just me because I certainly treat my stuff like it's equipment. But so if you buy a camera, first step, I mean, I'm going to send everybody to YouTube. I mean, there's a lot of courses out there, for Adobe. You could type in Adobe Premiere courses, and I'm sure you could buy something. You can take local, college classes. But for me, I really think that I'm not discounting that an education or a media department is worth it. I have $0 in debt to get into this career. And that is, because of YouTube. I mean, there's no doubt about that. Like I said, I'd make that list. If you purchased Adobe Premiere Pro, if you are a student, it's definitely cheaper because you can get a student discount where I think you pay $20 a month for the entire Adobe suite. I personally recommend Adobe just because of the access to Photoshop, Lightroom, and Premiere Pro. The integration is very, very nice from the photo side of things, making thumbnails and the actual video editing. But if I was going to start, I would get Adobe Premiere Pro. I would then go to YouTube and I type in Adobe Premiere Pro basics, Adobe Premiere Pro shortcuts, Adobe Premiere Pro, how to use it. The other thing is Adobe Now, man, when you get it and you go to the first interface, they literally have a video for every aspect of it. The hardest part, it's not getting the equipment. It's not securing the lessons on YouTube. It's then finding something to edit with. Because at the end of the day, the hardest part, I'm lucky, like I said, in my journey, because Jared would give me footage to work with. That is where I've seen the most folks kind of hit a wall because you can only go out and shoot so much. And especially when you're earlier on in your quote unquote experience, you're not thinking creatively. You're still trying to think about how to run a camera. So if you can then network to work with folks, like, for example, we run an internship or Breaking Point TV runs an internship. Internships are going to be your best way to get into this quote unquote space because you are now going to be exposed to higher level media that then you can practice with. I've always told, our guys, I'm like, if they come in and they're like, man, I really love videography. I'm like, fantastic. Then you need to become a better editor. If you really want to become an excellent videographer, you need to edit because you're going to see firsthand the stuff that you shot that day. Oh, maybe I didn't shoot as much as I thought, or oh, maybe it wasn't as good as I thought, or man, my audio wasn't at all what I thought it was. Because now when they go and make all those mistakes and frustrations in the editing side, they go back out to the video world, they're not going to repeat those. And so it's just it's a relationship where if I want to become a better editor, I need to video more. If I want to become a better videoer, I need to edit. And so learn to love both. My biggest recommendation is learn to love editing. If you really, really want a career in this, I think that's the space that has more of a need in the semi-live world, especially. I mean, everybody likes the video, but the reality is everybody can charge a little bit less. In learning, in my opinion, the videography aspect of it is a little bit easier. Editing takes some time, but at the end of the day, it will certainly separate you when it comes to a resume.
Let's just say somebody does find a way in and they've got a nice job with whoever, right?
Yeah.
How can they build on their skill set? Is there, would you advise people to keep improving? What would that look like to you?
Yeah, I mean, I've never really looked at it as like, and that's the hard part to give perspective on, man. It's like, I just love what I do. I didn't get into this for any other reason that I love to be in a tree stand. I got really lucky and then that I learned to love to edit. And so my skills naturally, it's just an experience-based thing. I mean, I always make this comparison. It sounds really strange, but my reference to Bill as a track coach, and my track coach was probably the most influential person in my life, as far as somebody other than my parents. It's the same thing where it's like, you don't ever have to wonder how much time somebody puts behind the keyboard, or you don't have to wonder how much somebody prepared for an individual race. Your time tells you everything. And so editing is just one of those things, video too, where it's like you have to put in a bunch of work when nobody's looking. If you want to practice how you play, you need to practice more than the next guy. You need to watch more tutorials. You need to take a camera with you more. I've been very, very lucky, to edit great hunters footage. That obviously makes it easier. It's easier to tell a good story when you've got Bill Winke or Jared Mills or Owen Riegler or Mark Drury, Jeff Lindsay. Like, those are all folks I got to edit hunts for. And it's like, it's pretty easy to make a quote unquote production that ends up turning out well because of the masterminds in front of the camera. So, it really does come down to like just immersing yourself in all aspects. The other thing too that I would say is, if you're trying to get into the hunting quote unquote media space, don't overlook that every other media space has a lot to offer you from ideas. Myself, I personally don't watch hunting shows anymore. That is one caveat where like you edit them all day. I mean, I'll watch my, really good friends and try to support them, and I want to see how their hunts unfolded, but just like the general consumption really isn't there. However, when I'm watching, like, I love watching ESPN documentaries because when, their film techniques or their sound design, it's all stuff you can apply. Peter McKinnon is somebody I would recommend folks to go listen to or to watch because he's fantastically entertaining, but he also does a lot of different tutorials. He has a lot of creative ideas. The guy's a magician at first. He's a photographer. Most deer hunters probably wouldn't think to want to watch somebody like that, but he has so much to offer. So if you start to look like media, like football players do film, you really, all the answers are right in front of you. If you want to learn how to film hunts better, go watch a hunting show and break down every single clip before it changes to the next one. If it's a pan going left to right, envision yourself with, what did they have? What was their equipment? It was a fluid head in a tree, camcorder, and they were tilting it like this. Like, that's how I started trying to teach myself to film better, was breaking down every shot that was in a hunting show, envisioning what that looked like inside of an SD card. And I was like, man, I got a lot to learn, but it just builds on itself every time. But the number one thing, you have to love it. Otherwise
Go ahead, man. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, otherwise you'll burn out from it.
Yeah. Really have appreciated the time here today. Now, before we go, I'm going to put you on the spot.
Okay.
I want your top 3 favorite Midwest whitetail hunts all time. It doesn't have to be your hunts specifically. It could be anybody.
Definitely not my hunts. I promise.
So I'll give you give your top 3 and I'll give you mine.
Okay.
I've dropped down.
My top 3, number 1 is going to be double G4. That was, Bill shot that deer. That to me was the first time I ever appreciated a real quote unquote multi-year story. And that was like I love Midwest whitetail. I got to see the ups, I got to see the downs, and I got to see, it come together at the end. Number 2, I would probably say number 2 for me is going to be either Jared's 186 in 2016 or his Big Ten story. One of the two. Those two are tied at the top for me in that respect of number 2. 186, I had a little bit of distaste for, just because like I had hunted with Jared so many days in a row. And I was like, man, I got to take a nap. I got to sleep, man. And then I got a call like 7:00, like, dude, he's down. And I was like, God. But it was
Is
so
that the
awesome.
one he shot at like 4 yards?
Base of the tree, real heavy. Yeah. An incredible animal. And then number 3, GQ, filming Lee for that 204. That was, and like the thing is, they're all at the top for me, but the GQ story was one that it was such a pleasure to be a part of, just running a camera, because like, it was just one of the most fun chases, just like a real cat and mouse, monarch deer involved. Lee is one of the most kind people that I've ever met. I mean, it's amazing how much he shares what he worked so hard for. That's not something very common, I think, in the hunting world. is that somebody, acquires enough ground for them, for their family, etc., and then is open to share it with others. So seeing him get to cash in on his biggest buck of, his life so far was awesome. Not to mention the 20 days we put into it. It was kind of just like one of those like, oh my gosh, he's finally dead,
Yeah.
But yeah, those would be my top 3 or 4.
Hey, one quick follow up. I've always wondered on the GQ hunt.
Yep.
First of all, huge props to him for being able to one stop the buck, because if anybody that's seen the video, I mean, he's like running in full sprint,
Oh yeah.
and just to being able to get the deer to stop is quite an accomplishment. And two, with all
Yes.
that pressure and adrenaline, being able to execute the shot. My question was, he expired very fast. Did you guys ever find out? Was it
Yeah.
the shot? Like, did it clip the femoral artery, and that's what did it, or
That deer
did
died
he
so
did he
fast because he
pass
broke his
away
back.
from the fall down into the ravine?
Yeah, that's what killed him. Um,
Okay,
I do believe that the femoral artery was hit. That is why he just acted as frantically as he did, because that where he runs off, there's no trail. I mean, there's no reason that he couldn't have just ran where he was going to follow those fawns like any other deer would. That deer was mortally hit. But I mean, it's like 3 seconds between, like you were mentioning, the screaming at him to stop, arrow hits, boom, boom, boom. You can actually, if you turn up your volume, you can hear it. And that
yeah,
is
it's like a car going off a bridge into the water or something.
correct. And then there's nothing. And that was the moment, like I was just trying to process what happened. Cause I mean, 25, 30 minutes before that, I had been trying to convince Lee, I'm like, please, let's move. He's not coming here. Let's move. And then Lee's like, all right, fine, we'll do it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we're actually doing it. Oh no. Cause like, if this doesn't work, I'm going to look, whatever. But roller coaster, man. I mean, it gives me the chills just thinking about that moment. Because it was, I mean, there was some really cool encounters before. There was some really heartbreaking, like, man, are we ever actually going to get this done? So for it to come together that way was shocking. Yeah.
So my top three, I feel like I was spoiled from the beginning, because the first episode I ever watched was the G5 buck that
Yep.
Bill killed in, I want to say, was that 2011?
Would have been 2011. Yeah.
Okay.
That was, yep.
That was the very first episode I watched and was hooked from there.
Mhm.
If anybody has not seen that one, I suggest looking it up. Jared's giant 10 from the ground,
Yep.
in the snow. That's
Snow.
number two for me. And I don't know, I've always enjoyed this one. Bill's, it was his 2019 surprise buck. That was his last season on the show. And
Yep.
I remember the first time I watched it, obviously, like when the buck is standing there and he's really, really big, but then as he walks closer and closer, you're like, man, he's a lot bigger than I was
Mhm.
thinking. He just kept getting bigger and bigger as he walked closer to their blind setup. And that one just always stuck with me for some reason.
Yeah. No, that was a cool phone call to get. I remember exactly where we were. Drake texted me and said, because we weren't calling him surprise buck at that time per se. It was just the big deer from the year before that Bill was trying to find. And Max Mongrello and I were deep in some public land. And I was like, we're out. We got to go. And so that was a really cool one too. I mean,
Yeah.
the beams just kept going. The brow time's super long. And yeah, no, that definitely is a great one too.
Josh, again, thank you so much for coming on here today. If anybody wants to check out Midwest Whitetail, what are the different ways they can get connected with the show?
Yeah, you can follow Midwest Whitetail on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube Shorts, etc. That's where we do a lot of our social updates and content. On YouTube, you can watch. There's 3 different channels on YouTube. There's Midwest Whitetail, which is going to have our Monday shows, After Hours podcast, Chasing November. There's the Midwest Whitetail Daily Series, which will have daily updates. For example, if me and you went hunting tonight, by the end of the night, that hunt will be uploaded to it. The whole goal of that's a very raw. There's nothing super cinematic about it, but just shows what strategies the guys are using, what deer they're after. Here's what our plan was. It either worked or it didn't. And here's what we're going to do next. And then there's also the Midwest Whitetail Regional Series, which is a separate channel on YouTube. We air 3 episodes a week on that with guys all over the country. You have your Heartland show, which is Iowa and Illinois. And then you got your Great Plains, which, as the word alludes to, Missouri, Kansas, Nebraska, and some of our guys are actually even further south, like Arkansas, and a couple guys from Louisiana, and then the East Show, which, you know, basically everything east of Illinois. So we've had a lot of great hunts coming in on that, and very, very proud of that team. That is one thing that I can't stress enough is Midwest Whitetail is not one person. It is a conglomerate of people who enjoy telling a story through a lens and, you know, love the deer hunt, and they have a lot to offer. So appreciate anybody who takes the time to check those out. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Good luck to you guys the rest of the season, Josh.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much.
Again, Josh Sparks with Midwest Whitetail, and this is Brownfield's Outdoor Adventures. I'm Brent Barnett.